Welcome everybody to Sociology. This is Introduction to Sociology with Professor Mead. In this course, we will be looking at mostly basic terms and core concepts. Keep in mind that sociology is a science. It's the systematic scientific study of human society. So we look at society both on the large scale, macro level, and on the small scale, micro level or individual interaction scale. But keep in mind that when we talk about these concepts, even though we introduce them one after another without talking about a lot of their origination, they all come from systematic scientific inquiry. They're not based on casual observation or opinion. So let's get Today we'll be focusing on sociological imagination. Sociological imagination is a complex paradigm within sociology, but it's also one of the core paradigms. So by the end of this lecture, you should be able to define sociological imagination and identify how it's relevant to our contemporary society and to your own biography. You should also be able to identify some basic terms. Now, keep in mind that sociological imagination is both looks at society on a large scale and a small scale, so macro and micro. It also attempts to take into account personal biographies, society, and the history of that society and that person to explain or understand the social location and social situation of the time. So the questions that we're looking to be able to answer by the end of this class: what's the difference between sociology and sociological perspective? What's the difference between basic and applied sociology? What type of sociology could be considered middle ground? Could you identify and define sociological imagination? Can you locate yourself in a time and place and make some inferences about how your fate would be changed based on that social location? Identify social institutions, name a few social institutions, and be able to explain specifically how that particular social institution impacts your life. Basic term sociology, the technical definition is that it's a scientific study of human society. And what we know about sociology is that it often debunks commonly held beliefs about society. However, the common person often thinks of sociology as what we would call armchair theory, which is casual observation, or about just making assumptions about people in general. We don't do that in sociology. Instead of making an assumption just based on our own history and bias and casual observation, we use scientific inquiry, data analysis, and information to test hypotheses, to see if these often commonly held beliefs about society are true. A good example of how science in general or data and information can debunk a commonly held belief is the idea that men are better drivers than women. So we often hear that, right? Women are terrible drivers or men are better drivers. However, if you were to ask an insurance company about male versus female driving, they are going to give you a higher rate if you're a male driver versus if you're a female driver, because the data shows that men are more likely to get in a car accident than women. And when men get in car accidents, those car accidents tend to be more severe than the car accidents women get into. So we commonly hold the belief that men are better drivers, but data and information shows that insurance companies do not hold that same belief. So a sociological perspective is the attempt to understand society by framing it within a broader social context. That means that you are trying to take the perspective that is large scale and then using science, sociology, right, the scientific study of human society, in order to understand individual or smaller scale human behavior, or even large scale human behavior. So let's talk about basic and applied and public sociology. So these are all kind of basic and applied sociology are two sides of the same coin. Basic sociology is analyzing society for the purpose of adding to the knowledge base. Meaning, if you are a sociologist who does scientific research and your goal is to do research that's not biased and then add that information through research papers and presentations, documentaries, anything like that, that means you're a basic sociologist. You want to do sociology or science for the purpose of adding to the body of information that we already have. An applied sociologist does also do science. They want to analyze society, but their ultimate purpose is to help solve social problems. So they're not just trying to add to the body of knowledge. Once they add to the body of knowledge, they want to use that body of knowledge to help to solve some of the social problems that they may see as identifiable within society. So income inequality, racial inequality, sex inequality, right? They're attempting to help to use that scientific information to be able to change some of the inequality that we have in society and to help make things more equal for everybody. Now, public sociology promotes the middle ground between the two. So whenever you see ASA, American Sociological Association, or APA, which is American Psychological Association, these organizations are what we call public sociology organizations, meaning that they don't take a side between basic sociology and applied sociology. They want us to do both research and reform, or they accept both research and reform, and they give us a platform to be able to share and build that body of knowledge. Okay, so let's get to the next slide. So this is C. Wright Mills, also the person you saw in the very first picture on the motorcycle. Was kind of a famous one of him. And he's the person responsible for sociological imagination. A very simple kind of one sentence definition of that is the ability to see our particular problems and our successes as well are not unique to us, but are the result of larger social trends. Right? So one of his quotes is, every individual lives from one generation to the next in some society, he or she, I added that in, lives out a biography, and he lives it out with some historical sequence. By the fact of his living, he contributes, however minutely, to the shaping of his society and to its history, even as he is made by society and its historical push and shove. What that means is that biography, society, social context, macro and micro level interactions are all very important when it comes to sociological imagination. That every individual within society is impacted by society, by the time and the place in which they live. So if you can imagine yourself, who you are, your race, your sex, your religion, your sexual orientation, put yourself back 200 years. Would you still be in a classroom? Would you still be allowed to get a college degree? What type of job opportunities would you have or not have? Would that improve your life or would it make it more difficult? Would your opportunities be constrained or do you think that they would be opened? In the same regard, what if you took yourself and you put yourself on the other side of the world in the same time and place? How would that place shape who you are? And how do you shape that place and time? So even as individuals, if we only shape our community and our society in a small way, we all still shape our community and society. But our society always shapes who we are as well. One of the ways in which it does it, in which society has a very strong influence on who we are, is through what we call social structures or social institutions. So social structures are things like government, education, religion, economics, family, um, economy, technology. These are all social structures within our society. So don't think of government as just the DMV or just Congress, right? The government is the system of government within our society and how that influences us. The economy is not just your access to a job, but it is the economic basis that your society uses and the opportunities that you have or don't have within that economic basis. So religion isn't your church or synagogue, it's the religious institutions. The one that people sometimes turn their head at is family. So how is family an institution? So when we talk about family as a social structure and institution, they're not talking about your individual family. They're talking about the concept of family and all the policies and laws surrounding that idea. Who do we consider to be family in our society? And how do we structure our society around that concept? What opportunities does that increase for you as an individual or decrease for you? So it's the concept and the structure of family within our society, not our individual families. So if we think about our biography, society, and history, right? And we think about it in terms of the social structure or institution of the economy. Right? We could say something like, the economy is making it difficult for me to find a job. Or we could say these large scale macro level forces of the economy are impacting my personal life, right? Nobody has jobs to offer, and therefore I'm struggling to find a job. Not what's wrong with me, why don't I have a job? That's not understanding through the sociological imagination. Understanding through a sociological imagination means that you're able to place your individual self into the larger, broader social context and understand how those things are impacting your life, right? So if you have a developed sociological imagination, you're more likely to say, I'm not the only person with personal economic problems because it's the result of a larger social trend, maybe an economic downturn, or I'm not the only person who's having a difficult time finding a job because the economy is turning down. Can you do the same thing with education, family, or media, one of our other social institutions? So in a little more detail, a social institution is the complex group of interdependent positions that together perform a social role and reproduce themselves over time. So if we think about something like, um, let's use, what have we not done yet? Let's use religion. So the social institution of religion, right? The Catholic Church is a large, complex, interdependent set of organizations. Even if you're not Catholic in our current time and place, you know Catholic ideologies, and they may actually, very well actually, impact your everyday life because people's ideas that are connected to their religion can be impacting your personal life through government policies, through economic policies, or even through types of education, and especially through your family. They set the context for your behavior. They set the context for your orientation to life. They even shape the way that you think and your behaviors, even if you may not necessarily realize that's true. Let's take education, for example. When you go into a classroom as a student, you already know that you're going to sit in one of the seats designated for students. You've probably never seen a student walk over to the teacher's podium or desk and sit down, or go up to a teacher and call them dude and then, butt into their lecture. That's because when you walk into the institutional organizations of any classroom, right, any educational system, there's certain rules and behaviors that the teacher should take, but you also know there's certain roles and behaviors that the student should take. So it's going to set the context for your behavior. It even shapes the way that you think. Now, I don't mean that your teachers are brainwashing you, because that's simply not true. What it means is that when you walk into a classroom, if your teacher were to, for example, break the social norms and they are sitting in a student seat, you probably are going to assume that they are not the teacher, because you are already thinking that that's their role, that's the way that they need to behave, and if they break that norm, it's going to change the way that you perceive their identity and their role. You also have a certain set of expectations. In our culture, we often don't expect our teachers to sit down with us or have a lot of discussion with us. We also don't expect to do a lot of activities in our classrooms in college. We expect the teacher to stand up front and lecture towards us, and for us to sit down and learn quietly and passively. When a teacher moves into a different style of teaching, sometimes students actually get quite upset and say, well, they're not teaching. Even though the teacher is teaching, your thoughts are that since they're not taking the role that you expect them to take within the classroom, that they might be teaching in a different way, your thoughts about their teaching method or style can be influenced in regards to that. What I want you to think about when you think about an institution is that you need to frame your thinking on a macro level, right? On a large scale level. So it's not your local classroom, it's the education system as a whole. It's not your church or synagogue, it's religious organizations. It's not your family, it's the context of family, right? So it's the idea of family. It's the laws and rules surrounding who can qualify as family and get insurance. It is the idea of who you could call family based on maybe a piece of paper or a religious ceremony. A few examples of this would be our religion, our education, our economy, medicine, so think of the medical field as a whole, not your doctor's office, politics, law, science, military, mass media, and family. These are a few examples, good examples of institutions. Okay, so our study guide questions, also found in your discussion board, that I would expect you to answer as a group. You can divide them up any way you would like, are the following 8 questions. And I hope you enjoyed your very first lecture. I can tell you I'm not a fan of video lectures. I am trying to make them short and sweet. And a lot of the videos and other information that you will find in your activities, this would have been done in the classroom had we been in the classroom. So our lectures have gotten shorter, but they're also made up with the additional information, text entries, videos, Flipgrids, different types of activities that we're doing. Have a nice day, and thank you very much.